because right now we are honored to welcome Senator Sherrod Brown from the state of Ohio, U.S. Senator. Senator, I can't thank you enough for giving us the time in your very busy day. How are you?
I watch SportsTime, and I remember listening to you announce when Rick Manning would ground out to the second baseman, ending almost every Indians game, it seemed like. Didn't it seem like that back then?
I'm very flattered, Senator.
I
still give him the business now that he's doing the games here on STO.
But he's still got to play a lot more Major League games than I did or you did.
Oh,
right?
Isn't that the truth? And I say to this day, one thing about Arch, as much as we can kid him, he was one of the best defensive center fielders ever.
Got good jump on the ball, good speed. Yep. And he caught the last out in the perfect game. Right?
Absolutely, which I was honored to do with Len Barker.
Oh, were you announcing that game?
Yes, Joe Tate and I did that game, Lenny Barker's perfect game, on Channel 43 back then.
Well, I was living in Columbus then, and I had my car radio on. I was coming back from something. It was about the sixth inning, and you could tell in Herb's, they never said no-hitter in those days.
Right.
They wouldn't jinx it. So I remember you could hear in Herb Score's voice something was going on. About the seventh, I figured it's a no-hitter, and about the eighth, you could figure out who had batted and where they were in the lineup. And so the only place I could get that game on radio in Columbus with, I guess, 1,100 in those days. Like, this is back in 70, whatever it was.
Right. And
I remember I had to be on the interstate on I-70, and I got to hear the ninth inning. It was very exciting. And there were no fans there, of course.
About 4,000 fans, but you know what? There were about 200,000 fans that said they were there.
Oh, yeah, there were exactly. At least 200. As a kid, I saw Rocky Colavito pitch. And he was playing, whoever the announcer, Gordon or McGee, one of them came out, Bertie Tebbetts, and signaled, I thought, to the bullpen, and he was signaling to Rocky from right field to come into pitch. And my dad always said, there are only 9,000 people here, but there are going to be 200,000 that said they were here.
You're originally from Mansfield, aren't you?
I grew up in Mansfield, yeah. So my dad was an Indian fan. My email address is Damn Yankees. I hate them. I brought my kids up to hate the Yankees.
Well, I hate what I found out, with this story. Senator, how in heaven's name did this come about that our athletes' uniforms were made in China?
Well, I think, first of all, it's not public money, so there's no role for anybody to we can complain about it and try to embarrass them and encourage them to buy Hugo Boss in Cleveland, because those are workers here that make suits. But I think what happened is a lot of these people in the Olympic Committee are typical sort of international business guys that look at the bottom line. They think nothing about sourcing jobs. That's why, what's happened in Cleveland and Akron and Youngstown and Toledo has happened. That it's just sort of par for the course. You outsource these jobs, you save a little on the bottom line, and they don't think twice about the number of families that get destroyed and communities that get hurt when these jobs are outsourced. So I just think they were surprised when they heard the public reaction. They shouldn't have been. You weren't, I wasn't, but they were, and I think that's part of our problem now, that these companies, they'll shut down a plant in Garfield Heights, they'll move it to China and sell back into the United States. Business never did that anywhere in the world until the last 20 years, and it's become too much a typical business plan for these, not small companies and small manufacturers, but the really big guys.
This is one issue that everybody's united on in a day when we are so divided. But I know, Senator, you and a lot of other senators did you write this? Is it Lawrence Probst III, the chairman of the U.S. Olympic Committee?
Yeah, I wrote the chairman of the Olympic Committee the morning that it happened, that we found out, which was, I think, last Thursday morning. On Friday night, the CEO of the Olympic Committee called me, who actually is a guy from Aurora, Ohio. He grew up in Aurora. Me graduated from high school 30-plus years ago. And he committed to me that they would, in 2014, it would be all American-made clothes. I don't know if that means it's going to be done by Ralph Lauren subcontracting. They're actually going to bring production back. I don't know. And I said to him, why don't we try to work together and see if when the president, which happens every 4 years, the president invites the Olympians to the White House after the Olympics, medal winners and non-medal winners alike, and why don't we see if we can outfit them with, it gives us another couple of weeks. He said he'd work with us on it. I don't know. He might not work at it at all. I don't know, but I think they got the message that this can't happen again, and they made a terrible mistake, and they need to fix it. So it's not going to be fixed by next week, but I'm hopeful we can get at least some American-made clothes when they come back to the White House, when they come to the White House in a month or so.
I see the men's Blazers Team USA cost $795 a piece, the women's $598 a piece, and the ties cost $125. Senator, I'm on television every day. I don't pay that kind of money for a tie.
Yeah, but you look like you do, Bruce. So. No, that's exactly right. I mean, it's not like, it's like Apple. When Apple outsources all its production, it's just pennies on the dollar for what they're making, the workers' wages. And if it's in the United States, it would hardly, if they were workers in the United States who'd be paid a lot more, it still wouldn't be a very big part of the final cost. And I mean, I buy suits from Hugo Boss, made by union workers in Cleveland. They don't make a lot of money in a textile apparel plant, but they're paid an okay wage, and they're American workers, and the suits aren't extravagantly expensive. And it's just, they can do this stuff with American workers at a reasonable price. And like you said, well, you look at what you buy in the team shop. If you buy an NBA jersey, they're made usually in a place like the Dominican Republic. They charge, a lot of money for those, and the cost of labor is so small, whether it would be in the U.S. or whether it would be in Latin America, they can afford to do that without really jacking the price up. And it's too bad they've made this decision in too many cases to move production offshore.
Is it true that we have made the Russians' uniforms here in the U.S.?
Oh, I don't know that. I will find that out. The Russian uniforms, really?
Well,
I doubt it. I'll find it out. I don't know that.
I've got conflicting reports. I'm going to quote a New York Post piece this morning saying American Apparel CEO Dov Charney is saying that his company has been in talks with the Russians since 2011 for a deal to clothe the Russian Olympians for the 2014 Winter Games.
Okay, we'll find that out. I'm going to pay a lot of attention to this in the next year and find out ways that we can do a lot better here. And it's not just the opening uniforms. It's it's everything from the swim trunks to the jerseys they wear to the hockey uniforms or hockey equipment that they wear. So I don't know about those. I didn't know any of this until this story broke, because I wasn't really. I do a lot of stuff on trade issues and taxes, and our trade policy and our tax policy clearly is wrong-headed on the things like NAFTA and PNTR with China and all that stuff. And I've been fighting on those for years, but I did not know about the Olympic team, what they did, and we're going to pay a lot. I think the American public's going to be watching closer now.
Senator, we also have gotten in. I was promoting the heck that you were kind enough to join us on the show today, and we got off track with some of the viewers on the American flag. We're getting conflict. Are all the American flags made here in America?
No, there's two answers to that question. The flags that fly over government buildings and flags that you would just buy at the store, that anybody would buy. There are no requirements of any kind for flags you'd go down and buy at the store. And many of them are foreign made. There is a law in the United States now, if the federal government buys a flag with taxpayer dollars, 50% of that flag has to be U.S. made. Well, I've got legislation to make it 100. It passed the Senate unanimously. The Speaker of the House won't schedule for a vote. We're trying to get him to. There's a flag company in Coshocton, Ohio, that makes flags.
Right.
There's simply no reason, if taxpayer dollars involved, that the flag shouldn't be 100% American made. No reason I can come up with. It doesn't mean there aren't going to be a lot of flags sold that are not American made. I think that's kind of bizarre, but it's the free market. People can do what they want. But if they're taxpayer dollars, whether it's to build the Oakland Bridge in buying foreign steel, if taxpayers are paying, this ought to be American steel. If taxpayers are buying the flag and flying it over the post office, it ought to be American made. The Olympics is different, Bruce, because it's not public dollars, but it just seems like it is to the public, and that's why people are so upset by it.
Senator, I recently saw a piece, and I don't think it's on the air any longer, but I mentioned it to the viewers, and a lot of the fans have seen it. It's about a Chinese professor in China teaching Chinese students and about global economy. And at the end, he kind of snickers and he says, bottom line is we own America, and the whole class laughs. Are you familiar with that piece?
I'm not familiar with that piece. But
it was so disturbing. I was just appalled by it.
Okay, it was over YouTube or something?
No, it was on network television.
It was on network television. I have not seen it. I do know that every country in the world practices trade according to the national interest, and we practice it according to some economics textbook that was printed in 1982. I mean, we don't represent our national interests on trade policy and on. I mean, the government. I'd say newspaper publishers. I'd say business elite and economists at Harvard and Yale have betrayed their country by these trade policies that have cost us so many manufacturing jobs. We lost, Bruce, between 2000 and 2010. We lost 1/3 of the manufacturing jobs in this country, 5 million jobs, 60,000 plants closed. In the last 2 years, we've gained 500,000 jobs. We're coming back, partly because of the auto rescue that made a huge difference for our part of the state. I live in Lorain County, Lorain, Cuyahoga, Summit, Stark, all this whole region of the state, and the whole state, but especially there. But we've got to pay a lot more attention to making stuff. We know how to make things better than any place in the world. We're losing our edge, and we can't keep doing that.
Is it true what I heard recently that we rank now in the mid-20s in both math and science?
Well, there's those Exxon ads that say that. I know we don't rank very high, what we used to. These other countries. I think South Korea has a 220-day school year. We have 180, something like that. I mean, there's a lot of other factors, and they put real premiums on getting people going to school in engineering and math. And we still are the best. I mean, we're still the best place to study. Look at how many foreign students come to the United States to go to college or get graduate degrees. Like you walk around Case. Case is one of the great engineering and science schools, and liberal arts too. But in the entire Midwest, maybe the country. And a lot of foreign students come, and welcome. We ought to keep them here if they want to stay here, because they'll start businesses. I know a Japanese American man who started this, went to Case. The Japanese have tried to woo him to come back. He's made a very good. He started a company. He exports a lot. He's a real benefit to the community. Those are the people we want to keep here that are the best scientists in the world, and we're still a magnet for them. The question is what happens next. We then outsource too much of our production and lose our edge.
I know how busy you are. A couple more questions. I'll let you slide. One of our viewers wanted me to ask you about your stand on blackouts in the NFL. We just had a story that the Browns are not going to take advantage of a new blackout policy in the NFL, which actually is easing it for NFL cities for the fans' benefit, obviously. But I know that you took a stance that any stadium that was not paid with that was paid with taxpayer dollars shouldn't have any blackouts.
Yeah, well, I did, and I it's not an issue that a senator should be all that involved in, because there's more important things to do than in terms of jobs and health care and all. But
sure.
It's one of those things that, especially in Cincinnati, there were so many taxpayer dollars involved in that stadium, and the product on the field was not necessarily something to brag about. It was pretty good this year, and so fans weren't showing up, and then they couldn't watch the game. Although one guy told me, he said, a guy from Cincinnati wrote me, Bruce, and he said, keep out of this. He said, when the Bengals aren't broadcast at 1 o'clock because of blackout, then I really get to watch professional football instead. So that's one guy's opinion. But it's clear to me that these guys get all these special breaks, the owners do, in the NFL, and they ought to open. They've got to make their team attractive enough and price tickets attractively enough. The average ticket price in the NFL, I think, $72, a little less in Cleveland and Cincinnati. But they bring the price down a little so people come. But I mean, when I was a kid, you and I are close enough in the same age. I didn't go to Browns games much. My dad always took me to Indians games. We'd go to a doubleheader, probably the whole day for three boys, and my mom and dad driving up from Mansfield would be $75 for a doubleheader and hot dogs and and parking. And now it's probably $500. And it's inflation, but not that much. And they've got to do better. The owners have got to do better here.
Last question, Senator, and it pains me to ask you this, but I think it's almost audacious that we continue to call ourselves the United States of America. We're the divided states of America. I mean, what are we united on? We're united on this uniform issue. We're united on flags. We're united on our love for food and drink. We're united on our love for sports and the arts, movies, music, etc. But we're not united on anything else that I can think of. And in this election year, sir, how do we bring the parties together? How do you guys get anything accomplished without more divisiveness?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, we're united on. I mean, I'm on the Veterans Committee, first Ohio senator ever to be a full term on the Veterans Committee. We're united on all kinds of issues with veterans. I mean, it really is not partisan in that committee. We just passed an agriculture bill, a farm bill. We do it every 5 years, very bipartisan. We passed the transportation bill, very bipartisan. So there's some progress, not enough. I think this election, I mean, there's going to be divisions. It's an election year, and once that's over, I'm hopeful we come to the table and do the right things for this country, because there's so much we need to do, as you know.
You know, again, because we're of the same generation, the viciousness today, I don't even recall. I remember watching as a kid the Nixon-Kennedy debate. I never have witnessed viciousness on both sides like today.
Yeah, if you read American history, there's some stories. I finished reading a book called The Founding Brothers by a guy named Joseph Elson. He talked about Adams and Jefferson and Washington. They were pretty nasty to each other. I mean, Jefferson and Adams particularly were, and they didn't have 24-hour media. They didn't have the internet, of course. They didn't, so it was a little harder to have the kind of back and forth. But now, you know, one candidate runs an ad, and the other candidate runs an ad, you know, the next day, because you can turn around so fast. And there's so much money. I mean, in my race for the Senate, I won't make this political, but in my race for the Senate, there's been more money spent against me than any Senate race in the country, $10.5 million. Most of it we figure is oil companies that don't like me for a whole lot of reasons, because I think they shouldn't get tax breaks, for instance. But, I mean, there's all that. So the level of money and the speed at which media can respond, and the omnipresence, if you will, of media all conspire, maybe the wrong word, all come together to make this harder and worse. But I'm always hopeful for this country, because we always figure it out, and we continue to do pretty well. But I think the focus has got to be, how do you keep the middle class? That's why manufacturing, the subject of your show today, is so important, to keep stuff made here and start bringing stuff back here, because we know how to make stuff.
U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown. Senator, thank you so much for giving us the time.
Buddy. Sure.
All right. Appreciate the Senator joining us and sharing his thoughts on the issue of the uniforms, and more than that, too. We'll be right back.